What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, today's video, I'm going to be talking about Alpha Flight #1 by Ed Brisson and Scott Godlewski. I'm going to openly admit something that I feel like a lot of people probably used to say back in the day when you had your pick of all of the different X titles, all the different X-Men stuff. You could pick, your core X-Men, you could pick X-Force, you could pick X-Factor, you could get your Wolverine, your Gambit, and your various and sundry other X spinoffs. But one book that I was never checking for was Alpha Flight. Of all of the new crop of Fall of X books, the one that I was least interested in checking out was this one. This book is actually pretty damn cool. Now, it should not be any surprise because Ed Brisson is on the book, and Ed Brisson is a fantastic writer. The guy literally can knock just about anything out of the park. He is responsible for a lot of my favorite stories across not just Marvel, but in other imprints. This one was not going in the direction that I'd initially expected it to. The whole point of this comic is to showcase that Alpha Flight are going through a little bit of a rough patch. And what I mean by rough patch is that because of the events of the Hellfire Gala, Alpha Flight has been fractured, with its non-mutant characters going one direction and its mutant characters going in another. Stalwart Alpha Flight characters like Guardian, who, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this character, you may have known him back when his name was Vindicator, but Guardian and other Alpha Flight members like Shaman, Snowbird, and Puck, each of those characters, none of them are mutants. Even back when Sasquatch was on the team, Sasquatch was not a mutant either. He was a human mutate. The mutants in question for Ed Brisson's Alpha Flight kickoff are going to be characters like Aurora and Northstar, twin mutants who both possess the power of superhuman speed, as well as both having the ability to manipulate and generate light into the form of concussive blast, as well as the more recently christened Fang. For those unfamiliar, Fang is in fact Wolverine's son, Daken, or however the hell you pronounce the damn kid's name. No one really seems to be in any agreement on this. I've seen 3 different ways to pronounce the kid's name, and everyone gets mad at me when I say either one of them, so I don't care. His name is Fang now. We also see another character introduced in this, or rather reintroduced in this, by the name of Nemesis. Nemesis has been 3 different women over the course of her publication histories, going all the way back to 1983. 2 of them are dead, 1 of them is still alive. Technically speaking, pretty much every version of Nemesis is dead or considered undead, with Jane Thorne, the second Nemesis, being the only one who could potentially be an outlier. Jane Thorne is also the only one who's never actually been seen meeting their final end on panel. The original Nemesis, Isabel St. Ives, and the last version of Nemesis, Amelia Weatherly, both versions of these characters were undead spirits of vengeance, what were later referred to as the living embodiments of retribution. Undead spirits that existed until they no longer had a reason to exist. And in both instances, in the case of Isabel St. Ives and Amelia Weatherly, both characters, once they had served their purpose, had finally passed on into the afterlife. We don't really know what happened to Jane Thorne because the last time we saw the character was the very final issue of Alpha Flight Volume 1, which was canceled after issue 130, and that character was never seen or heard from again. So if there was any version of Nemesis that this could potentially be, Jane Thorne seems to be the most likely one because whatever unfinished business that she had was never finished. But taking that into account, since Nemesis is the embodiment of retribution, I could easily see with everything that happened at the Hellfire Gala that this could either be the return of Jane Thorne, the second Nemesis, or this could in fact be a 4th new Nemesis who this time around happens to be a mutant who was killed at the Hellfire Gala. There were multiple characters that were killed during the Hellfire Gala. If it is in fact someone who is a mutant who was killed at the Hellfire Gala, then there's no shortage of individuals that it could potentially be. We know that Jean Grey was killed off during the Hellfire Gala, but I don't believe that this is her. We also know the characters like Jubilee and Dazzler, as well as Frenzy, and Lourdes Chantel were also killed during the Hellfire Gala, and considering that the exit this Nemesis makes is a teleportation move, I wouldn't be shocked if it turns out that this was in fact Lourdes Chantel. However, I don't know if it's the right time to bring that character back right away. But yeah, this could honestly be anybody. All we know is that when the schism is initially depicted of Alpha Flight and how there are humans on one side that are working alongside the Canadian government, who is openly working in tandem with Orcus, we later see Nemesis working on the side of the mutants. But in the end, it doesn't truly matter, because there is really no actual schism. This is all theater, at least for the members of Alpha Flight. While we do see Guardian and the rest of the gang going toe-to-toe against Aurora and Northstar and the rest of their gang, it doesn't really matter because they're all playing a role. Initially, when I picked up this book, I was very certain that Ed Brisson was going to pull this move where Alpha Flight was legitimately going to be divided and it was going to be humans versus mutants, and that was just going to be the cut and dry run of it. And I'm pleasantly surprised here. And to be fair, this is something that makes a little bit of sense if you had been keeping up with Al Ewing's Sword series. During the Sword series, Guardian had thrown in his lot with Henry Peter Gyrick, a guy who has been a long-time hater of mutants and was one of the original pedals of Orcus, before he was unceremoniously killed by Abigail Brand. Guardian had seemingly thrown in his lot with him that he saw Krakoa as something potentially dangerous. He felt as though the mutants, while he loves them and he cares about them, they have been his friends and allies throughout the years, he felt like Krakoa was just a step too far, that it was something too scary to just let run unchecked. So he threw in his lot with Henry Peter Gyrick, worked closely with him towards the end of Al Ewing's Sword series, and then we would later learn that Guardian realized that Gyrick was out of his whole damn mind. It wasn't until Guardian realized that Gyrick didn't care whether or not one of the two sword bases at the time crashed into Australia. Gyrick was okay with the idea of possibly eradicating anywhere between 25 to 26 some odd million Australians. And Guardian just couldn't cope with that. So that was actually what pushed Guardian away from Gyrick. But in this, we learn that Guardian was not drinking the Kool-Aid the whole time. The real question is, how long has Guardian not been working in lockstep with the Canadian government? Because right now, the Canadian government hates mutants. They want to protect Canadian interest from any and all mutant threats, to the point they have completely thrown in their lot with Orcus, to the point that they are workshopping their own version of the Stark Sentinels, what they are referred to as the Box Sentinels. And if that name sounds weird, it's because there is a character among Alpha Flight, a guy by the name of Roger Box Jr., who, for those unfamiliar, is the son of the original Roger Box Sr., a guy who used to go by the name Box on the original Alpha Flight team. He was a guy who created inventions and machine tech for Alpha Flight and Beta Flight. And his son, Roger Box Jr., is no different, only this time Roger Box Jr. is creating Sentinels, his own brand of them, for the Canadian government. These Sentinels are not as large as the Stark Tech Sentinels, which are as tall as buildings, as tall as skyscrapers. The Box Sentinels are smaller in nature, closer to the size of a normal human, but still bigger than your average human, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 or 8 feet tall. Now, as I've already said, while half of Alpha Flight, the human portion of Alpha Flight, has been pretending to be working in tandem with the Canadian government and Orcus, this is not the case. What Guardian and the rest of his gang are trying to do is buy time for Aurora and Northstar and the rest of the mutants on Alpha Flight to get any and all mutants that they can find in Canada away from Canada and onto Chandalar, which is the throne world of the Shi'ar Empire. They don't have Krakoan gates anymore, so they're gonna have to travel there the old-fashioned way. They're gonna need a starship in order to do this, but until they can procure a starship in order to pull this off, Guardian and the rest of the gang have to run interference. And because the Box Sentinels are about to be deployed, this means they have to act fast. X-Men. This is Future Blerd Without Fear. I am sending you this transmission to let you know that you must act now. Before this video is over, I need you to Hulk smash that like button. I also need you to click that subscribe button, as well as tap that notification bell, so that way you can stay up to date with all my videos breaking down the X-Men, as well as other comics from Marvel, DC, Image, wherever. I have to break this psychic link with you now because Orcus is on to my location, and I cannot risk giving up the mutant Underground Railroad. I just can't. I have to break this transmission now. Let's get back to the video. Now, initially, I wondered if Guardian is working in tandem with mutants and is pretending to be an anti-mutant fascist in order to stay inside the organization and spy on them. Part of me wondered if Roger Box Jr. was doing the same thing, creating these box sentinels that maybe don't work as advertised to Department H. I don't know if any of that is true. Guardian kind of seems to be happy to see Roger Box Jr., but once again, he is pretending to be working in lockstep with Department H. I'm hoping that maybe Roger Box Jr. is not actually working with Department H in full step the same way that Guardian is. Like, maybe these box sentinels are going to help protect mutants. There is something that Roger says that they will only do what he allows them to do. Like, this is Roger's way of saying, yeah, I made these, but they're on our side. That's what I'm hoping is happening here. Another cool thing that's brought up here is that another character who is more specifically associated with Beta Flight returns in this issue as well, a character by the name of Feedback. Feedback never appeared in a whole heap of a lot of comics back in the day, but his power was more or less that he could create energy construct shields. In a roundabout way, he was kind of like the proto Armor. Like, if you're familiar with the X-Men character Armor, she can create these biokinetic fields around herself that are effectively virtually indestructible. Feedback could do something incredibly similar. And they actually kind of use this comic to explain why we haven't seen him in a while, is because he has been in hiding and pretending to be a human, but he is outed by Orcus when they discover that he's a mutant. So now he's on the run, which means he will likely be meeting up with the newly reformed Alpha Flight. And we also are introduced to a brand new character for the series by the name of Laurent Bavoda. They are effectively a T-1000. They can turn into liquid metal and create all kinds of shapes and forms out of liquid metal. At this precise moment, they don't seem exactly like they're ready to be putting on any crazy superhero suits, but it looks like they're gonna wind up doing it anyway, because while they are technically on the run and trying to get away from Orcus, like, they're even willing to go anywhere so long as it's to a place of safety. Something tells me we'll see this character rise up and become an actual hero for Alpha Flight down the stretch. Whether we see characters like Sasquatch return is debatable, because for those who have not been keeping up, Sasquatch is kind of in a weird place right now. Dr. Walter Lankowski, who was the original Sasquatch, is not in his original body anymore. He is in the body of Hulk ally Doc Samson. And the same can be said for Doc Samson. Doc Samson is no longer in his body because the original Sasquatch is now piloting it. So Doc Samson is piloting Walter Lankowski's Sasquatch body. It's safe to say he's going to show up at some point, but I wouldn't expect to see him right away just yet. Now, a character I do think we could potentially see somewhere down the road is Persuasion, the daughter of Zebediah Kilgrave, aka the Purple Man. Persuasion, back in the day, used to be a member of Alpha Flight, and she is a mutant, so she is definitely on the table as far as characters who could come back, and it would make the most sense. I also would not be surprised if we saw characters like Sunfire or Centennial, Chinook, Goblin, Flex, or even Wildchild for that case. Even characters like Radius could possibly pop back up at some point. All of these characters were former members of Alpha Flight who also at the time happened to be mutants. Some of them have been depowered. Some of them I think may or may not even be currently dead. But anything is possible right now during the House of X era, because a lot of characters that were originally presumed dead have been spotted walking around or just casually hanging about the place because of mutant resurrection at the time, even though currently mutant resurrection is off the table for the foreseeable future. But I gotta admit, I'm definitely more interested in Alpha Flight, I think, today than I ever have been in my entire life. And yeah, go Alpha Flight. If you enjoyed this video, do the YouTube thing, like, share, comment, subscribe, and make sure you tap that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the videos I put out, plus when I live stream every Saturday. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and until next time, let me know what you thought about Alpha Flight number 1. Keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.